All right, good morning. The pardon board is reconvening. We're at Elaine Hunt Correctional Center. It is Monday, July 24th, 2023, and it's 10:09 a.m. I'd like the staff at Hunt, please introduce yourself for the record.
Good morning, Warden Donnie Barlow.
Cecile Long, classification.
Mr. Warden, Carl Thomas here.
Joe Buttress, Assistant Warden.
Okay, thank you. Is that everybody? Thanks for accommodating us today, Warden Bordelon. And our first case, sir, would you introduce yourself for the record? Tell us your name and your DOC number.
My name is Carl William Bunyak, 331022.
All right, Mr. Bunyak, let me, I'm going to read some identifying information into the record after I acknowledge all the folks who are here in the room with us in Baton Rouge. After I read that information into the record, I'll turn it over to Mrs. Jackson, seated to my left. Your case has been assigned to her. She'll take the lead on the interview. But first, let me acknowledge the folks who are here with us today. Here in support on Zoom, we have the Parole Project, Mr. Kerry Myers. We have a representative also joining us on Zoom, Mr. Clark with the DA's office. He'll be speaking at the appropriate time. We have Brandy Galloway, Brittany Galloway, Roland Galloway, Darian Galloway, Tina Galloway, Ina K. Galloway, Ashley Galloway, Casey Galloway, Tiffany Crane, Jay Galloway, Terrell Mizell here with us in Baton Rouge. Those who've indicated they'd like to speak also here are Daryl Galloway, Chris Galloway, and Phyllis Galloway. So at the appropriate time, we'll call on the folks who've indicated they'd like to speak. First, Mr. Bunyak, as mentioned, your DOC number is 331022. You're here this morning seeking a commutation of your sentence. You were sentenced in October 1993 in the 22nd Judicial District, St. Tammany Parish, for a conviction for second-degree murder. You're currently serving a life sentence. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Would you answer Mrs. Jackson, please?
Good morning, Mr. Bunyak.
Good morning.
How are you today?
I'm doing good, ma'am.
How old are you, Mr. Bunyak?
I'm 64 years old, ma'am.
And how much time have you actually served on this charge?
A little over 32 years.
So that would have made you about 32 when this offense was committed. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Tell us a little bit about your background. Where did you grow up?
I grew up on a farm in northern Ohio. My parents, my father was an aerospace technician for NASA, and my mother worked around the farm. We raised horses, raised our own beef, raised our own pork.
And how much education did you have?
I got my GED in Angola. I was working on an associate's degree.
Stop talking. I'm not there yet, sir. Why didn't you graduate from high school?
I was busy working, and
What do you mean you were busy working?
Pardon?
What do you mean you were busy working? You were living with your parents on a farm. Your father apparently, had a good income. There was a farm. So why did you stop going to school?
I just couldn't complete it. I was busy with my job, and I just didn't have time for it, really. I just left it alone.
Okay. And what other kind of work did you do after you're working on the farm?
Oh, I was working at a grocery store. At a grocery store, I was baling hay for several other people in the area. Doing farm work.
So how did you end up in Louisiana?
I had a friend, I was living with a fella in Ohio. And his father died and left him a piece of land here in Louisiana. And he talked me into coming down here. It was Mardi Gras.
How old were you when you moved to Louisiana?
I've been in Louisiana, I was in Louisiana for 16 months before I took this charge.
Well, tell me about your history of drug and alcohol use.
I have a drug conviction, trafficking in drugs back in June
Ohio.
pardon?
In Ohio.
In Ohio, yes.
When did you first become involved in drug use or drug selling?
When I was 16.
And tell us about how you became involved in drug use. What kind of drugs were you using? How often were you using those drugs?
I knew some fellows at school, at high school, who were into drugs, mostly just marijuana. And I smoked some marijuana with them, and I continued to smoke marijuana.
What other drugs did you use besides marijuana?
Back then, nothing else other than marijuana.
Well, you said back then, when did you start using other drugs and what kind of drugs were they?
I've used cocaine, I've used PCP.
And the stuff right there. When did you start? How old were you when you started using cocaine?
I must have been 18.
Okay. And how often did you use cocaine?
Not very often, from time to time. It wasn't something that I used regularly, no.
What about PCP?
The same. That's what the trafficking charge is. I didn't have any, but I knew someone who did.
Say that again.
I say that's what the trafficking charge is for selling PCP. But I didn't have any. I knew someone who did.
So how were you involved in the trafficking?
I sold it to an undercover agent, I guess.
Well, you said you didn't have it, so in order to sell it, you had to have it.
I went to get some for them.
Also, you've had some issues with alcohol, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
You had a DWI arrest. How many times have you been arrested for driving while intoxicated?
Several times.
When did you start drinking?
I started drinking, I was probably 16.
What kind of alcohol did you drink?
Oh, just beer.
And never anything beside beer?
Pardon?
Never anything other than beer?
Oh, yes, yes. Back when I was 16, it was just beer, but yes. I drank,
Mr. Bunyak, I'm trying to get from you a picture of your substance abuse issues. I'm not limiting it to when you were 16. I am encompassing the whole time frame up until you committed this offense. So I'm trying to get a picture of what your drug and alcohol use had been.
yes, ma'am. I used liquor also.
What kind of liquor? Did you
I
have a preference for a particular kind of liquor?
Yes, I like Jim Beam, Jack Daniels, I like tequila. Rum.
All right, so you kind of liked it all.
Well, I've been locked up for 32 years. I'm away from all that now.
Well, that's my question. Back then, you kind of liked it all.
Yes, ma'am.
How often were you drinking on a daily basis? How often did you drink?
Several times a week.
You said you moved to Louisiana to live with a buddy of yours who had inherited some property, and that was about 16 months prior to the commission of the crime. Is that correct?
Yes,
Okay, and how long did you live with that friend?
several months.
And why did you stop living with that friend?
I had to get some money together to get a place of my own.
Okay, did you get a place of your own?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and where was that?
I had several places. I was living with a girl in Abita Springs. I had a place in, I think it's Big Branch for a minute. And I had a place in Covington where I was living before I moved in with Ann.
Well, let's talk about Miss Mock. Is that who you are referring to as Ann?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, how did you meet Miss Mock?
I met her through a friend who I met at a bar, told her to come to the bar to meet me.
Okay. And how would you describe the nature of your relationship with Miss Mock?
We were friends and lovers.
Okay. So she was basically your girlfriend, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And she was quite a bit older than you, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. I believe about 11 years older than me.
How would you describe your relationship with Miss Mock?
As I said, we were friends and lovers. We had a good relationship with each other.
Well, what you said in your account of the events is because you killed her because she wanted you to move out of her residence. So if you were friends and lovers and you had a good relationship, why did she want you to move out of her residence?
I don't know. I still don't know. I didn't do anything to cause her to ask me to move out.
So just you came home one day and she said, I want you to move out. Is that how it happened?
Well, I had just moved in. I finally got all my stuff from my apartment to her apartment
Mm-hmm.
earlier that day.
Mm-hmm. And she said, I don't think this is a good idea. I want you to move out. Correct?
Yes, ma'am.
So
Right.
why didn't you just move out?
I should have.
Why didn't you?
I didn't have any place to go.
Well, you just got to be telling me how you had all these apartments and all these places and all these, place in Covington and then with this other girl. You had an apartment that you had just moved out of.
But I couldn't go back there. I had no place to go.
And so what did you do when she asked you to move out?
I tried talking with her
And
she wouldn't change her mind.
then what?
And then she started getting loud, and I tried calming her down. I couldn't understand why
How did you try calming her down?
by talking with her,
Okay,
and she just wouldn't listen. I
So
asked,
so what'd you do?
she was getting loud, and she come to me and she hit me. So I tried to control her. I should have turned around and left, but I didn't.
What, she was an older woman, older than you. What was her size? How big was she?
She wasn't real big, no.
Give me an idea. How tall? How much she might weigh?
I'm not sure. She might have been 5'8", 130 pounds, maybe 140. She wasn't very big, no.
And what about you? How tall are you? How tall are you and how much did you weigh back then? What'd you think?
I'm 6 foot. I was about 175 pounds, man.
Okay, and so she came at you, she was hitting you, and then why didn't you just leave?
I should have turned around.
Why did you?
I'm not sure.
How was she killed? How was she
Pardon?
killed? How was she killed?
I hit her 4 or 5 times. She fell on a mattress. She had a mattress out on the floor. She fell on the mattress, and then I turned around and walked outside. I stepped outside. I couldn't understand what was going on, what had just happened. I needed to clear my head. So I stepped outside, and I was out there probably 30 seconds. I come back in, decided I'd change my clothes and leave.
So let me ask you this, you hit her 4 or 5 times, what, with your fist, hand, how'd you hit her?
With my fists
Where? On her body?
on her head and her face.
Okay, and so 4 or 5 punches to her face caused her death?
Pardon?
4 or 5 punches to her face caused her death?
Yes, ma'am. I didn't intend to kill her. I had no idea she was gonna die. There was no intent to kill her. I just couldn't control myself. So as I said, I changed my clothes and I left. And I went driving around. I drove around for a while, and then I went to a bar. A bar that was open all night long. I had a couple beers. From there, I went back to the apartment probably 4 or 5 hours later, and she was unresponsive. She was still laying on the mattress, and she was unresponsive. I immediately went to a payphone.
Mr. Bunyak, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
We haven't been able to hear you for the last several minutes. And so my last question had been, your contention is that you punched her 4 or 5 times in the face or head, and that was the cause of her death.
Yes, ma'am.
And after that happened, what did you do?
Pardon?
After that happened, would you do?
Outside for 30 seconds to clear your head What did you do?
I went back in and I changed my clothes. I went to my car and I drove around for a while, trying to realize what happened. And I went to a bar that was open all night long. I went to the bar, I had a couple of beers. I stayed at the bar till it closed, I think at 5:30 in the morning. Then I went back to the apartment. She was on the mattress, unresponsive. So I immediately went to a payphone that was down the street. I drove to a payphone that was down the street. And called 911.
Right?
They, the
Let me,
first,
Ms. Bunyak, let me stop you. At the time you first, went to Ms. Mott's house, were you impaired? Had you been drinking, when you came to her house?
no, I just got off work. I was working at a Pizza Hut. I just got off work.
And you had not had anything to drink?
No, ma'am. I had a pizza and I stopped by and I did get a 6-pack of beer. And I went back to the apartment.
What'd you do with the 6-pack of beer?
I had one beer.
Well, you just got to tell me you hadn't drank anything.
Not after I'd been to the apartment. I had not been drinking before I come to the apartment. No, I've been working.
So when did you start drink? When did you buy the 6-pack of beer?
On my way home from work. I bought a 6-pack, I had a pizza, I took them back to the apartment. I had one beer.
Was there a history of domestic violence between you and Ms. Mott?
We did have a problem prior to this incident.
Tell us about it.
I believe she thought that I drank too much. And I think she called the police.
Well, your drinking too much is not a crime. So what did she call the police to report?
That I've been drinking. I'm not sure exactly what, I know there was nothing. I can't remember much about it. It wasn't a big incident.
Well,
I can't even remember.
were you arrested when she called the police?
No, I was not arrested. Not that I know of. I don't believe I was, no.
Well, what about in Ohio? Did you have a domestic violence incident in Ohio?
No, I didn't.
Because you said you did, that's why I'm asking you.
Okay, they're talking about, I had a disorderly conduct.
You might have pled to a disorderly conduct, but you specifically stated that you had 2 domestic violence incidences, one in Ohio and one in Louisiana involving Ms. Mott.
No, there was nothing in Ohio involving Ms. Mott.
I didn't say the incident in Ohio involved Ms. Mott. I said you reported 2 incidences, one in Ohio and one involving Ms. Mott.
It wasn't a domestic violence. It was a disorderly conduct that I was charged with and pled guilty to, and I did 30 days in the jail for that.
I'm looking at, it says arrest date, January 1st, 1986, Loudy, Ohio, offense, domestic violence. And according to the note, Mr. Bunyak acknowledged he went to court for the domestic violence charge and was placed in jail for 30 days. That
Way
was Mr. Bunyak, you were the person, you know where it was.
The way I understand it, it was a disorderly conduct.
Whether it ended up as a, okay, then leave that alone. So let's fast forward, Mr. Bunyak. Tell us, what you have done to address your obvious anger issues and your substance abuse issues since, being incarcerated. Tell me, what programs have you taken?
I've done the AANA 12-step program
Okay, let's stop right there. When did you do that?
just recently.
How recently?
The 12-step program was completed probably a month or so ago.
Well, because it was so recent, you should be able to tell us what you got out of that program.
I've learned a lot from that program. There are 12 steps.
Well, that's part of the title, 12-step program. So I'm trying to figure out what steps you've learned and how you are applying that to your situation.
I've learned about sobriety. I've been sober for 32 years. I've learned, I'm glad for myself for being the person I am, because as a group, a lot of these people.
Mr. Bunyak, what did you learn about yourself and your addiction through the 12-step programs?
I learned that once an addict, always an addict.
So do you now consider yourself as being an addict?
No, ma'am, I don't, but
Us?
once
I'm
I've
coming
been
back.
taught,
I'm sorry?
I've been taught that once an addict or an alcoholic, always an addict or alcoholic.
And so that's what I'm asking you. Are you an alcoholic and an addict?
I haven't drank or done any drugs in 32 years I've been locked up.
So you don't believe then that once an addict, always an addict?
Oh, I do. I need to stick with that.
Well, Mr. Bunyak, that you're not telling me that. You know, you're not telling me that. What else have you taken, Mr. Bunyak?
I have a copy of all the,
We have them too, Mr. Bunyak. Maybe I should ask the question in a different way. Are there any programs that you have taken that you believe have changed you fundamentally?
yes, it changed me from the person I was.
Yeah, who? Give me a program. Give me something that was the catalyst for your change.
The change from the drugs and alcohol, or the change from the person I was before.
All of it.
Okay, I've written some stuff down here so I can remember everything without forgetting it.
Well, I have what we have in the file, what you've written down, Ms. Bunyak, probably. But a lot of times you ask people, well, what programs did you take that really had an impact on you? And they don't have to read from notes because the program is in them. They remember how it affected them and how it caused them to change. And that's what I'm asking you. I don't want you to read something to me. I just want you to tell me, Ms. Jackson, I took this program, and when I took this program, it did blank. And as a result of that, it helped me become a different person. I'm not asking you a hard question, Mr. Bunyak. I'm asking you, please tell me why I should believe, or anyone else on this panel should believe, that you are a changed person.
I'm definitely a changed person. I've been through the KG which is an anger management program. There they teach me to learn to cope with my emotions and difficult situations, about de-escalation, about listening, about thinking before I act, how to treat others with respect, cooperation, compromise, and mutual agreement. I've taken Malachi Dad's.
Why'd you take Malachi Dad's?
Because I had a problem when I was on the street with my children. It seemed I didn't care enough about raising my children. I was too busy chasing girls and drinking beer.
Well, how many children do you have?
I have a daughter in Ohio and a son in California. I lost contact with them over the years. I don't have access to any of the technology that you have to where I could run them down. My daughter just quit writing to me, and my son, his mother, for some reason, she was emailing me, but for some reason she just quit emailing me. She emailed me on my birthday, wished me a happy birthday, and hasn't done that since then. I think something happened to her, but I have no way of finding out.
What about other family? Have any other family, Mr. Bunyak?
My mother, my father, and my sister are all dead. They died in 1920 and 21. I have a brother in Ohio, but we don't have any kind of relationship together.
So if you were to be successful, and Ms. Bunyak, I'm looking at your your annual offender assessment, and it's dated 6/19 of 23. And it says substance abuse treatment, you are on the waiting list. The 12-step program, you were on the waiting list. And this is as of June 19th of 2023.
The substance abuse, I believe, is living in balance.
Are you on the waiting list for that?
No, ma'am. I've been taking living in balance for the past probably 2 months, I had another month, but the last week was supposed to be the first week of August, but since we're on the COVID restrictions, I've had a packet sent to me that I need to fill out and send back to Mr. Sparks. And he's supposed to send another package to me.
Well, so you're not in living in balance.
I am in living in balance.
Warren, is there anything you can tell us about Mr. Bunyak?
Pardon?
I'm asking the Warren.
Yes, Ms. Bonnie, first I'd like to just, say to the family of the victim that I'm sorry for your loss. He did start living in balance, after this, summary was sent in. He started it, he just started it not too long ago, so I'd like to see him finish that. And, also I'd like to see him, take victim impact. I think that would be beneficial for him as well.
Yes, I'm on backlog for that.
Other than that, he hasn't really been any problem here. He hasn't had a write-up in several years.
I see his last one was in 16. It was a contraband.
Yes, ma'am.
What was the contraband? Mr. Bunyak, in 16, you got to write up for contraband. What was the contraband?
It was a python skin belt with conchos and silver letters with my name on the back of it, and a Western style buckle.
And that was contraband.
Yes, they say it was something that I made in the hobby shop and wore regularly.
And Warren, can you tell us anything about that? You have anything you follow about that?
Yes, ma'am. At the time, a contraband, they had, it was a 1A, it was an unauthorized item, but it also fit under the, since then, it's been changed. That wouldn't be considered contraband now, it's an unauthorized item.
Gotcha, I got you. All right, so one last couple questions. I know you have someone from the parole project here, but long term, you can't live at the parole project forever. So what's your plan going forward?
I plan on getting a place of my own.
How are you gonna do that?
They're gonna help me with securing sustainable employment.
Doing what?
I'm not sure right now. The way I understand it, that will be determined at a later date.
What skills do you have?
Pardon?
What kind of skills do you have?
I've been a janitor for the past 9.5 years in the hobby shop. Before I become a dorm orderly, I've been a dorm orderly since April, but I've spent 28 years working in the hobby shop. I do woodwork. I do leather work. Most of my time I've spent doing leather work. I can cook. I used to set up and operate turret lathes for cutting metal. I can operate a forklift. I've done several newsletters for some of the clubs here at Hunt. I didn't send these to you. I didn't think about it.
Okay, Ms. Bunyak, I thank you. I just wanted to see if you had a definite plan for where you're gonna live, where you would work, and how you would support yourself.
Parole project, excuse me. The parole project is gonna be. I'll be living with them. As I said, they're gonna help to secure sustainable employment for me. Under their supervision, I'll get all my necessities.
I'm familiar with the work of the parole project, Mr. Bunyak. Thank you. That's all I have, Mr. Knox.
Yes, please.
Mr. Bunyak, just
Yes,
for
sir.
my sake, okay, you got off a Pizza Hut. You picked up a 6-pack of beer and you went home and you and Miss Mott shared the pizza.
Yes, yes,
Okay, when did you actually hit her? Before you left to go to the bar rooms or after you went to the bar room?
before I left, yes.
Okay, so you were sober at the time you hit her.
I've drank one beer. And I wasn't even halfway through. I mixed the drink. I wasn't even halfway through.
Okay, I just wanted to know if you were intoxicated or not. Okay, thank you.
Not at the time, no.
We're gonna hear now from the parole project, Mr. Myers.
Good morning, Kerry Myers with Louisiana Parole Project. Mr. Bunyak came to our attention several months ago through one of our board members who also volunteers at Hunt Correctional. After that, we interviewed Mr. Bunyak and realized that he needed a long-term support system should he get a recommendation. After looking at his disciplinary record and at his work record, we decided to support Mr. Bunyak should he be granted clemency. We will provide long-term housing for him while he is in the process of going through our program. Once he completes phase 1, we'll continue to provide housing. Mr. Bunyak is a candidate for our employment enhancement program, which is a program began about 4 months ago that's going to be connecting people who are leaving prison with newly developed high-tech industries between Baton Rouge and New Orleans. So Mr. Bunyak is a candidate for that, for long-term employment. Other than that, Mr. Bunyak has been as the warden said, has had no issues long-term at Hunt. His last write-up was about 6 years ago. He's only had 15 write-ups in his 32 years of incarceration. So we want to let it be known that Parole Project supports Mr. Bunyak's petition today and urge this board to grant him a recommendation.
All right, thank you. All right, we'll hear from the opposition, those folks who are here with us in Baton Rouge. First, could we hear from Daryl? Galloway?
More ladies, and you see I have nothing prepared.
Here you go.
So we're supposed to be here.
Sorry, I need you to speak up because I want everybody to be able to hear you.
How many of y'all still have your mothers alive? You ain't gonna raise your hand, think about it. You didn't go spend time with. And for y'all that don't have a mother that's alive, I hope that she passed in peace. I hope that she passed for family. I hope that y'all were able to give her last rites and an open casket, which we were denied. all we had was a picture of the casket. That's the last thing we saw. Since her death. She's had several grandkids. Some great grandkids. And as far as a person that was lovable and kind, she would take in an injured animal and she brought so many homes. And we were pretty much best by the time we were teenagers. Because she was so compassionate. And for her to be treated. And to lose her where we lost her. I'm begging you. Just said. Once alcohol, always alcohol. Once you organic, always you organic. What's the murder? I'm sorry when I tried to be mean before. You just don't realize when the head hurts. How much we have to suffer each holiday, each birthday. Can you imagine Mother's Day? Having a mother to give a bouquet of flowers to maybe two. I'm sure you, mother's lady, it means a lot when your children bring you something of that special thing. You gentlemen, I'm sure you make an effort to bring your mother something that's we can't anymore. And we ask that you please deny this cleansing. Keep Mr. Bunyak where he's at. We second.
Yes, sir, Mr. Galloway, thank you for your input.
Thank you.
We do appreciate it. Could we hear from Chris Galloway next, please? This is Phyllis Galloway.
Phyllis Galloway, the daughter-in-law to Patricia, and her and I were best friends. We did everything together. I met Mr. Bunyak 2 days prior to him beating her and killing her. I was babysitting her second grandson. Invited her to my house that Friday night to come see him because I wouldn't go to her house because I met him and I didn't care about him at all. And she never showed up Friday night. And I was very concerned, wondering why she didn't show up, which was kind of odd. The next morning I found out why. She was not able to show up to see her grandson, who was just an infant. It was her son and his wife's first anniversary. Their first anniversary is not celebrated every year. Never since that day. Only for them to find out that his mother was no longer alive. She was beat to death by this man and left for dead. He went out to a bar after he beat her, left her on the mattress on the floor to die. I had to go clean up the apartment 2.5 months later when the detectives finally released and let me go in. But I went into the apartment to see how this woman fought for her life. There was handprints on the door, slid down the door when she was trying to get away from this man. He beat her so bad, there was blood on the mattress in the floor. poured all over the floor, all over the mattress. She fought so hard to get away from him. She was dazed and confused, obviously. She put her hand on her phone that wasn't hooked up yet because she had just moved in. I helped her. Her phone was due to be hooked up the following Friday. She obviously was trying to make a call because her hand slid down the phone, slid down the front of the TV. She was fighting so hard to get away from this man. And he leaves her to die on the mattress while he's drinking. Not a care in the world for this woman. Not one care. I ask, please do not let this man out. Leave him where he is at. He will do the same thing to someone else's family member. As we miss this woman every day. This is something I'll never forget. I go to bed at night thinking about it. I wake up, I think about it. I just see the whole apartment, how he just beat her so horribly and just left her there on the mattress. As please do not let this man out. He is a danger to society.
Yes, ma'am, thank you. We appreciate
Thank
you.
y'all so much.
Chris, do you want to try again?
I was, the oldest grandson. And, I remember going to her house as a kid, watching babysitting. Loved it, every bit of it. My God, I come to an end. Nobody told me why, because I was 3-year-old, take so many things that grandma away. Who does that? But you know, you think about it, it's like, as you get older, this world is cruel. It's a cruel world. But is it? Is it the people like this that makes it cruel? Whatever though. But please do not let this man out of jail. Please, he's going to do it to somebody else. And then we sit here just hurt. Extra.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Clark, we'd like to hear from the DA's office, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Brian Clark on behalf of the St. Tammany District, St. Tammany Parish District Attorney's Office. My office is strongly opposed to any clemency in this case. I think what is more shocking than the gruesome and horrifying nature of this crime, this murder, and the manner in which it was effected is the shocking lack of remorse and statements that have been made by Mr. Bunyak as it pertains to the investigation for this clemency, including statements that the victim would think he had done enough time in prison, that 99% of the people would have survived the injuries that he inflicted upon her, and then furthermore, making just other very cold and callous comments, which with not even a hint of remorse. I think that has come across today at this hearing as well. Basically, Mr. Bunyak's entire claim is that he was provoked by the victim in this case, whom he savagely beat to death and left to die in that apartment while he went off to a bar and drank. I think the gruesome nature of this crime, this murder, coupled with the complete lack of any remorse, lack of sympathy, and with almost borders on a sociopathic nature on the part of this offender, should be disqualifying for any type of clemency in this case. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Bunyak, is there a brief statement you'd like to make to the board before we vote?
Yes. First, I'd like to thank everybody for your time and participation concerning this tragic matter. I need to say to the family, board members, and everyone present that I'm so deeply sorry and troubled over what I did. It should have never happened. I truly wish I could change it all. Board members, I want you to know that this time I've spent with you today has been the driving force for everything good in my life for the past 30 years. Over those years, I've strived to be the best person I can be. In my eyes, hoping it'll be good enough in your eyes to get a recommendation. I'm asking each of you to allow a second chance for me. Please allow the opportunity for me to move forward in a positive light. Thank you, and God bless you.
All right, thank you, sir. I think the board's prepared to vote. Mrs. Jackson?
Ms. Bunyak, I've listened to you, I've observed you, I have reviewed your records. And I cannot today vote to grant your request for a clemency recommendation. The nature of the offense, I think you were not candid with the board about what happened. We had the photographs of Miss Monk after her death in our record, and so we know that this was a savage beating to this woman. Your programming has not in any way addressed any of your issues. You've shown very little remorse except what you just said in your last statement about it. And I just really don't think you have the, maybe it's even the capacity for empathy. There was a history of violence against this woman. And again, I don't believe that I would feel comfortable at this point in time recommending clemency. So because of strong victim and law enforcement opposition, lack of programming, and lack of remorse, my vote today would be to deny. Mayor Moore.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'd like to thank all of the people who've been here today, spoke from their hearts. This is a very, very tough decision for everyone. Mr. Bunyak, in listening to your interview today, I agree with Judge Jackson. You need to look inside your heart and your soul and understand and realize what you did. You don't accept responsibility for what you did. You need more programs, perhaps victim impact, things like that, that might get to you so you could understand the significance and the harm that you have caused to everyone. So my vote today would likewise be to deny your request.
Mr. Freeman.
Okay, I echo his sentiments. I thank y'all for coming. It does make a big difference for us to hear from the victims' families. And it's obviously that she had a very loving family. And, you know, the only thing that really strikes me is that, you know, is that the heinous nature of the crime. And then you stayed in the investigation. I hit her 4 or 5 times from the back. And then you look at the autopsy and all of that, and teeth are loose and everything else. I mean, you need to come to grips with what you did. And you definitely have not, in my opinion. So my vote today is also to deny.
Mr. Bunyak, I do agree with everything that's been said. I won't repeat it all, but my vote today also is to deny your application.
Okay, let's unpack this. You know, there's no records of it. I guess he didn't file an appeal, or if he did file an appeal, but there's no, I don't have any details. I don't have the police reports. So the insight that I can provide is really limited to what we've heard in this interview. Maybe you guys remember Brian Clark. He's the assistant DA. We've covered him multiple times, and I'll tell you, he's one of the guys I do not want to come up against. He always looks pretty upset. We have one hearing with him. Maybe I'll pop it up here where he, Miss Jackson, Miss Renatza go at it He made a comment about the Vietnam War, and then they made a comment about him understanding the Vietnam War, and he did not like that at all. So, yeah, they've butt heads in the past. Now, to his credit, he shows up to his cases and he does his homework. So you're probably the kind of guy you want on your team. You probably don't want to work for him or with him, but maybe you wouldn't mind if he was representing your family. So, it's what's an interesting case about this is it makes you wonder, like, why, like, how did this happen? But if you're into true crime, you see this stuff all the time in this similar type of scenarios. He was 32 years old. He's dating a woman who's 11 years older than him. So she's 43, which at 32 and 43, it's a pretty significant difference. I know there's a lot of people that do it and it works great. I know people who have that age difference, no big deal, but it's, there's something there. And the first thing that caught me by a little bit by surprise was that his father was an aerospace technician. It's like, just kind of didn't expect that. On this side, he dropped out of high school. He's working at the farm, but then he ends up being like a pizza delivery guy. They're trying to get out of him. Does he have a drinking problem? And he's kind of just like, no, I drink some here and there. Didn't have a major drinking problem. And I don't think he realized it, but it would have benefited him, I think, if he said he did have a drinking problem. But I don't think realized it. He's kind of simple. I don't know. I can't quite put my finger on it. But I do think Mr. Clark, the assistant DA, Ms. Jackson, did put their finger on it, and we'll get to that. But he said, so he goes on to how leading up to the events of what happened. So he moves into her apartment. She moves into her apartment that day. It's brand new apartment. She's probably dealing with all the stress and anxiety of moving. Who knows how helpful he's been, if at all. He finishes work. He shows up with a pizza and a 6-pack of beer. They're eating it. He has one beer, he insists. And then something happens, according to him, where she's like, this isn't a good idea. And maybe she knew it wasn't a good idea all along. It sounds like she had friends that didn't like him that were probably telling her it's not a good idea all along. And this is where we've seen in true crime stuff all the time, where really the trick that what you have to do is when you break up, you got to do it in a safe place. But doing it in a high tense situation with this man, after he just moved his stuff in, and he obviously got mad. And according to his words, she started to get really loud. So I tried to calm her down, but she just wouldn't listen. And you could even hear the intensity in his voice, like she just wouldn't listen. And so I punched her in the face. And it's like, wow. Like from his perspective, it's almost like he went 0 to 1. Like, wait a minute, she wants me to move out. I just moved in. I have nowhere to go. He's probably, who knows what. She gets all dramatic, and he's just like, stop, just stop. And then he just starts going at her. And they're trying, well, were you intoxicated when it happened? No, I had one beer. Were you drinking no, I had one beer. So, it's a sober man who just snaps. And even all these years later, he's just kind of explaining it in this very no emotional, no flashbacks, nothing. It's just, I wanted her to stop. Then you hear about how, I think it was her friend or is it her relative? came to the house after a few weeks after the investigation. And I can't believe police leave a home like that for the victims to clean up. I've heard about that, but it's so shocking to hear it. And she describes that there's blood in the mattress and handprints like a out of a horrifying movie. Blood on the phone, even though it wasn't connected, and splash on the TV. And it's like it was a struggle and a violent assault. I mean, he didn't just hit her a few times. He raged on her. Rage. You know, and Brian Clark, the assistant DA, he's like, it's bordering on, I think he said, sociopathic behaviors. And Miss Jackson said, I don't think you have the capacity for empathy. And I agree from what we saw. I think we are looking at, and I try not to overuse this term, but I think this is the definition of it. And by the crime, it's someone who literally cannot empathize. He cannot feel other people's pain. And you know, he's not the brightest ones. He's not like, there are some that can manipulate. We've seen those, and there's some that just can't. He's not one that can manipulate. He really doesn't get it. I mean, he has all these years to try to come up with a story, to try to form it. And even in his pre-sentencing report, he lies. He puts blame on the victim. He says 99% of other people would have survived it. He's blaming the victim. He's saying, I didn't hit her, beat her that hard. It's her fault that she died. It's not my fault I killed her. It's scary. And that's why it's so important that people see this. There are people, I'm not an advocate for locking people up for the rest of their lives. I think that so many of these life sentences are nuts. But there are people that need to be locked up. And you see it here. And it's scary. It really is. I don't think there's any number of programs that can guarantee safety, because I think what it comes down to someone who doesn't have empathy is really, will they reoffend again? Maybe they won't because they care enough about them not to get locked up, but that's, I don't know. That might be the only reason why. But it is, you know, we shouldn't take for granted that we have the grandson of the victim come up here. It's like, and talk on her behalf, and we have a DA, and that's always great to see a victim at least represented all these years later, when in so many cases no one shows up. But that's my thoughts on this, and with that, I'll let you go.